So what I'm going to be covering is when AI exposes your culture and what you will find. And just have to figure out the technology. There we go. That's how I move the slides. So I just want to share a little bit here in terms of what was the original purpose of AI. And this can be a little bit scary. AI has been around for a long time. We've been using it or experiencing it and interacting with it through Netflix and Amazon and Google. All those big companies have been using AI for a very long time. And AI actually began as a tool for 4 different areas. It was spying. It was for sales. So anything, like I said, in terms of, when you get those pop-up ads after you've mentioned something on your phone and it's like, is this stalking me? That's AI right there. It's also been used a lot with gaming, and then even for killing, if you think about drones and, being very specific on where they're going. And Mo Godart is someone who has been around for a long time. He comes out of Google. He was the chief business officer there, I think, and then left because he felt like it was going the wrong direction, and is now an entrepreneur and a thought leader. And what he's saying is it's up to us now to rewrite the story. We need to bring in values and using AI for good, which I've become extremely passionate about. So when we work with AI in the culture, it changes things and our perspective in terms of, what we can look at. So I'm going to share a lot of great information with you. I have a limited amount of time. I'll give you as much value as I can here. I promise to let you know how to, get in touch and continue if you want afterwards. And let's just kind of go macro first. So this is research I heard on a talk recently. I had an event called Achieving the AI Advantage Summit, and Dinesh Garda was there. He's a forward thought leader, and he shared this slide, and it was haunting me afterwards, literally. And he said there are the top 10 countries that are investing in AI right now. And there's 195 countries in the world. And by 2030, are we going to be ruled by these companies or these countries, basically? So let's break it down. Basically, if we look, the US and China make up about 40% of the total investment there, what they're estimating. And then you've got Japan, Germany, and the UK, which expands it to the top 5 of those 10 countries are actually the ones that are spending about 75%. So, what happens to the rest of all the countries in the world? What are we going to do about that? And this is something that, we have to be having these discussions as leaders to be able to know what we're going to do, how we want to work with it. What can we do inside of our companies? And sometimes a lot of people will feel a bit overwhelmed. They feel like they're, just one person. What can they do to make a difference with all of this? And those are really good questions, but we can always have an impact in the circle of influence that we work with. So in our workplace, with our teams, with our colleagues, with our friends, with our family. So if we get more and more leaders that really believe in using AI for good and business for good and having this people first mentality, it's going to make a difference. We're going to unite and have a much louder voice in these conversations. And I think that is very much what is needed right now. So what is happening inside of companies right now? And I want to share a few things here because everyone knows it's kind of the traditional org chart. You've got the CEOs at the top, they're reporting to the board. Then you've got your C-suite leaders in larger enterprise companies. You've got middle management there, team leaders, then it goes to the employees, and then basically entry-level jobs. And that's been the way it's been for a long time, decades, right? Well, what's happening right now, because AI is taking the world by storm and redefining how we work, we're seeing actually a collapse of the bottom levels. So a lot of AI and robotics can potentially and is already starting to replace a lot of the entry-level jobs. And there's pluses and minuses to this. One, we definitely want to take away the mundane work from people, free them up to do more higher skill things. But people coming out of college or people coming into the workplace right now, they need to be able to find a job, right? And what are they going to be doing? Another area that we see, being replaced a little bit is these AI tools, and even the gig employees are disrupting teams inside of an organization. So where we're heading now, and we're kind of in this messy middle is what I like to call it, because we're like, a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, and we're in that cocoon period right now, trying to figure out what are we going to do with all of this. The big thing for this year and the coming years is really going to be AI agentic teams. And Leaders are going to be managing AI agents and teams that are running this. So this is actually the last generation that is actually managing only people. And that's kind of a weird thing to think about, right? So when you think about how this is collapsing from the bottom down, that, the young people are losing that first rung in. And we have to talk about what kind of an impact that's going to have on the culture, on learning, on trust. And the thing is, now is one of the best times to be an entrepreneur and start your own business, because there's so many tools that we can work with to really make a difference. So that on one side, it's very exciting. But then on the other side, if someone is wanting to have a job and work with a company, what's going to happen? We have a lot of unanswered questions right now because we're all on this journey together of AI transformation. I definitely see that we're going to a kind of a network organization where people are just going to be working together. I've been saying this for a long time, actually, that we are going to have people that are driven by their passions and purpose and coming together in teams and working on projects and then eventually dispersing and moving on to the next thing. We're not quite there yet. This is, again, a little bit of the messy middle transition period. But you're definitely going to have, the leaders, the founders of companies, and then they're going to have managers. They may have people on board. They may not. A lot of talk is out there on the who will run the first one-person unicorn company that's valued at over $1 billion. Is it possible? Absolutely, these days with everything that's happening with AI. So there's a lot of fear around it, but there's also a lot of excitement. And we really need to be mindful of how we're working with this. And I want to share a tale of two different futures. One company basically is very toxic. They have been around for a long time. And, they have a lot of fear. They have a lot of burnout. They have a lot of resistance in there. And they're using the same types of tools. We have another company, Company B, where people are really engaged and they're innovating and they're aligned and the culture is great. And what makes a difference between these two companies? And I've seen this time and time again, and I chose to keep it neutral because we can all see examples of both of these types of companies out there. And basically, they're using the same tools, the same AI, but what's happening is that it's mirroring their culture. So I'm going to refer back to these companies quite a bit as I go through my full presentation here, because there's a lot to learn from both extremes. So why should you listen to me? I have actually been collaborating with Inspiring Workplaces for over a decade. I have been thrilled to see how far they've come and what they're doing and how they're really lifting up organizations who can get recognized for how they are inspiring their teammates and inspiring leaders that are out there. So I have actually been working with culture and companies globally for over 20 years. And the last year and a half, I invested a lot of time and effort myself into learning about AI, because initially I was very resistant and very afraid of it. And then I started taking a few AI classes. I realized, wow, okay, this is going to change the way the world works. This is going to be a huge paradigm shift for all of us. So I thought I better get out handle on it myself and figure it out, because I work so much with culture and trust. And so I have invested over, a year and a half of my dedicated time after work hours every night, pretty much, for a long time, and getting certified in as an AI consultant, as AI implementation, and even data science, which I never thought I would study. But anyway, so I have learned a lot about AI, and I've become very passionate about using AI for good and business for good. So I do run a company called Evoloshen. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, I have actually just launched a new global summit as well called Achieving the AI Advantage, because I want to bring people's voices together around this topic. And basically, a lot of the research out there is saying we're not ready. Deloitte has come out with a report saying that 85% of AI leaders have no framework for trust. So we're building some of these most powerful tools in history that are changing the whole dynamics of the world and in the workplace and the workplace cultures. And what's happening is, if the culture is already fractured or dysfunctional or, toxic or not really supporting the people there, that's going to be magnified inside. And this isn't, I wouldn't say this is fear mongering. It's a wake up call for all of us that, a lot of leaders out there are flying blind. They don't have an overarching strategy. And so there's a lot going on in terms of the dynamics that are happening inside of a company. So we can kind of look at culture as that invisible operating system inside of an organization. your culture is your company's source code. And if it's rigid or biased or toxic, AI is going to accelerate that and make it happen even more as you're implementing it. Just like the first company A did this and has been doing it. They're optimizing everything in terms of production. They're replacing their people with AI and robots and basically optimizing everything, but they're not optimizing the culture. And culture is one of those levers that you can work with very strategically inside of an organization to make a difference there. So AI, as I'm saying, definitely reflects on the culture that it is built on. And it learns from the habits that you have inside, the values, everything that you're doing, everybody that's using the AI inside of the organization, it's learning from you and how you're using it. So sometimes things will come up that you didn't even know you had inside of the organization because it's learning from the patterns and the decisions and even the tone. So, there was a thing going around a few months ago that I guess Sam Altman said, please don't use thank you and don't be polite to AI because it's using up too much energy. The workaround about that is if you're going to put in a prompt to your AI, in that same sentence, say thank you. So you can teach it manners and teach it to be polite and teach it to be, how you want to be talked to back, right? So that first company thought that they were able to automate as much as they could, but really it was around a dysfunctional company or culture. And it just made everything that they were doing much louder. So what happens here when you don't have trust or the trust is absent? Basically, as I'm saying, AI accelerates those things. So, some of the research coming out this year is basically 70% of their employees don't trust their organization's use of AI. You've got 31%. Trust the business to use AI responsibly, which basically means 70% are not. So, you have to think about what is the overarching message that your tools are sending. And you don't want to have it to use it to destroy or, do anything that's going to amplify mistrust inside of the organization. So when engagement is tanked and innovation freezes, you can't deal with that with more AI tools and more. You have to deal with the people issue, which is why we're talking about a PeopleFirst Summit. That is, the only way to get around all of this is basically to really focus in on people first. And when you focus on people first, actually the profits are going to follow. I put profit smart here because that's what happens. If you have AI plus the human empowerment, it's going to have a substantial impact on the bottom line. So that second company that I've mentioned, they had a good culture to start, and they had a way that they had leaders who cared, and they were really working together as teams and testing things and experimenting and having an environment where people could learn. And it was kind of a growth mindset around all of this. And so, when you have a people first mindset, it's a strategy. It's not this, fluffy, softer side of business that we've been hearing for years. There's so much research now that goes into what happens when you invest in your people, what happens when you focus on purpose, what happens when you have high levels of engagement. All of that has a really positive impact on the bottom line. And, both Inspiring Workplaces and myself with Evoloshen, we've worked on this for so many years. It's not this softer side of business anymore. It does actually help to scale performance, and that will in turn bring around the profits that people want to see and leaders need to see for their organizations. So let's talk a little bit about the biology of trust. If you know anything about my work, I go deep into neuroscience, and basically trust is a biological thing. We are human beings. We have a, biological interface that we work with, and it's fantastic. It's what makes us human. And I think AI is often mirroring back to us a lot of what makes us human and brings up that uniqueness that we have as individuals, and basically making a very big difference on that. So when I say trust is biological, we're talking about, oxytocin and resilience and having clarity and imagination and ideas and things like that come from the human aspect, right? We can't outsource our brains. We can't outsource our thinking. We need to have that good balance between the two. And referring back to those companies again, that first company A, just basically ignored that, and things are breaking down inside of those types of organizations. But in that company, and we can even call it like dystopia and utopia, and in that company that had a really good culture and has a really good culture, they built on trust first, and then they've been able to scale on top of that. So you can't out AI a threatened nervous system. And we need to understand that, as human beings, if there's fear, you're going to have one sort of reaction. If there's not fear, if there's excitement, engagement, trust, people love coming into work and love what they're doing and they believe in the organization, you're going to have a great impact and a great positive environment, work environment that feeds people so that they go home happy. I think I've mentioned this many times before, but one of my favorite CEOs is Gary Ridge from WD-40. And he says, you don't want to send people home crappy. You want to send them home happy. And so this is kind of the two extremes that we're looking at here. So what do future ready cultures do? Well, there's kind of 3 levels that they can work on. You can choose to have transparency over control. In that very toxic environment, it's a lot about authority and control and micromanagement. When you have a high level of trust, there's transparency. People are open. They're willing to share and tell you as much information as you can. Then we look at, number 2 is focusing in on empowering your people rather than monitoring and controlling them again. So, how do you empower your people? You take the best parts of their humanness and what they bring to the table. You get rid of the stuff that they don't like to do or the, repetitive tasks. You use AI tools for that, and then you free them up to do even more things. And this is very important. The third lever is definitely purpose over just simply productivity. One of the things that I'm excited about when we look at engagement, productivity is one of the key factors that calculate productivity. But with AI, you can actually accelerate the productivity really well. But when you implement AI, it really needs to be balanced between the tech and the culture, the AI and the people that are there, and really embedding the purpose and the values into the company and the organization. It's not something you want to slide over and kind of pass over it really quickly. So those are the levers that you can work with, and it helps to set that foundation of trust. So how is your team using AI? And there's some interesting things around this. I call it a little bit of shadow AI because there's 2 things that happen. One, you've got people that are using AI at work. Actually, a report came out from KPMG that said 40% of workers are using AI pretty regularly now, but 57% are actually hiding it because either it's not an environment that is conducive to sharing what they're doing, and so they're not learning and growing together, or they don't want to risk losing their job or getting replaced because they're using AI. And then there's this silent sabotage. And it took me a long time to figure this out because I've seen it even before the whole AI model came out. But basically that you've got people saying yes to do things, but then they don't take action. They don't follow through. And I call that this silent resistance. And when I've mentioned this to people and leaders, they're like, oh, they know exactly what I'm talking about. So, we're seeing that even amplified and accelerated within like AI rollouts because people are saying, okay, yeah. But if you're not addressing the fear inside of an organization about what people have around AI, there's going to be that silent resistance, and it's going to hold you back in terms of, your AI adoption and strategies and what you're doing there. So, again, culture, having that aligned is really important, and it's going to be this plus or minus in terms of how you're going to work with it and use it as a strategic lever to work within. And here's another thing that I find fascinating. Over the 15 years I've been working with culture with leaders, it's come down to trust is that bottom foundational level. If you have a high level of trust, you can do a whole lot with engagement, a whole lot with, shifting the behaviors, making it so people love coming into work and doing great work, and the company accelerates and the growth expands tremendously. And AI, when it rolled out basically about 3 years ago now, when it kind of went viral for mainstream for everybody to start using it, I call it often the great equalizer. And, in the coming year, someone with 1/10 of a team and a cleaner culture can actually outmaneuver what you guys are doing inside of your company. So, the toxic company, the dystopian type company is going to learn this the hard way. They're not going to be able to recruit people. They're not going to be able to retain people. People are going to be moving away. They're treating people, and we've seen lots of examples. I'm not going to name names, but people have taken their whole customer service and replaced it by robotics. And then, a year later realized, oh, we still need humans here. It's like, yes, of course. Right. So people first mentality. And, it's just, if your team doesn't trust you as an individual, as a leader, if your team doesn't trust your organization, it's not going to be a good place. So trust is really that foundational thing in terms of what can you do to make a difference there. And, so who or what basically are people going to be trusting? Are they trusting the leaders, or are they going to be trusting their favorite GPTs more? Right. And this isn't about a disruptor in a startup. It's everywhere, and basically as you're bringing in young people, they're going to have a certain level of savviness that maybe others don't. And so we need to really figure out, how do we keep that human to human connection so that we don't lose it? We definitely need to prioritize that. And again, this people first culture, right? So it's really important that we prioritize culture first, people first. You can upskill for trust. You can focus on curiosity, getting people into that growth mindset and that resiliency that helps people to bounce back. And you definitely want to be investing in your people. The last Gallup study that came out, I think it was this year, earlier this year, global engagement has dropped again to 21%. It was on a trajectory up over the COVID years and all of that, but now it's starting to drop again. And, you have to be able to manage that and look at what's happening there. And, this focus on culture, it's not this side project you do. It's not something you outsource only to HR to take care of. I mean, leaders at the very top need to embrace it. You have to look at it from the bottom, get people engaged, and basically have it be a part of the entire infrastructure of the whole company. And you want to train it, or else it's going to become, pretty much irrelevant for you, and something to think about there, right? So, let's talk about, how do we rehumanize the workplace? And I think it's kind of funny to talk about that, because, a lot of the languaging we use is actually very financially based. It used to be human resources. At least that's starting to change. Now it's people and culture, chief people officer. The titles are starting to change, which is really important. We don't have human assets anymore. It's more about the people, right? And just those small, subtle changes with language make such a difference. And, there is a real opportunity. And I think AI is amplifying, and that's another word that's coming into our languaging because AI uses it a lot, right? But it's accelerating, it's magnifying what makes us human, what makes us unique, and how do we do that? And, when you have a very toxic dystopian type culture, they don't really care that much, and people feel that, So when we look at culture as a way to rehumanize, AI can free us up from the work we don't want to do, and what we truly care about, and this makes a really positive impact. So we use it in a way that optimizes what it makes us to be human, and don't treat humans like machines. That stuff is coming. So I want to share with you a little bit in terms of the framework that I work with, and this is called the Scale AI Roadmap. So I have integrated both AI and culture now, because I think those are two different levers that we can use inside of an organization. But again, you have to work with culture. So the first part is about strategy, figuring out what is it, how do you have an overarching strategy on how you roll out AI inside of a company. Then you look at the culture alignment and work with that. Then integrating the AI kind of at the same time, making sure that it's working, testing it out, starting small, scaling it up. And then at the same time, you want to be learning and developing your people and training and investing in them, getting them up to speed so that everyone is kind of on the same page. And then basically at the end of that, you're looking at the execution and making sure that everything is running well and evolving your company to the next level. So that's the framework that I like to work with, the roadmap, basically, when I'm, talking to companies. And I'm sharing that because just get an overarching strategy of your AI and how you're going to bring it in is really, really important. So basically, the breakthrough between these two companies is that the first company, they focused in on speed, productivity, they laid people off, they didn't care so much about the people that were left felt that, they didn't feel valued. Whereas the company that chose more the utopian version, I guess you can say, they had a great culture, they were choosing trust, they made it definite decision. And, it's never too late to start to shift the boat towards that, but you have to start taking action right now. It's really important. And basically, the last couple slides I have here for you, final challenge, and I want to just drop a little bit of a bombshell here, because by 2050, we're going to have over 9 billion humans, but it's estimated that we're going to have 30 billion humanoids. How is that going to change our world? How is that going to change our culture? Are we going to have jobs? Are we going to work? What's going to be happening there? There's a lot of things that need to be discussed, and really we need to embed purpose, values, and to create AI for good in a way that's going to make a really positive difference for all of us. So question as a leader is, are you ready for this? And is your culture of your company going to be ready for this? And are you going to survive through all of this too? So, this is not the moment to fear AI, but to lead with it. If we center on trust and purpose and integrity, then we don't just necessarily have to be reactive about this. We can be responding and moving things in the direction we want to take this and move it in a way that's going to be beneficial for humanity. And I'm very passionate about that. So we definitely are at a point and a choice point right now about defining our future, and we need brave leaders to speak up. So, I talk a lot about business and AI for good. We need you here. We need you to take a step up to be a part of this whole process. And here is how you can get in touch with me if you want to discuss anything, have a little strategy session around this. I'm happy to talk to anybody basically who has those values and wants to make a difference in their company that way.